Blue John Canyon was remote, untouched, and perfect for a quick adventure. I didn't tell anyone where I was heading, a decision I would come to regret in ways I couldn't even imagine. As I hiked deeper into the canyon, the jagged red rock walls towered above me, and the landscape became more desolate. I navigated the twists and turns with ease, feeling confident as ever. The adrenaline kept me moving fast. I climbed over rocks, leaped across narrow gaps, and squeezed through slots barely wide enough for my shoulders. The solitude, once peaceful, was beginning to feel unnervingly quiet, but I pushed that feeling aside. After hours of navigating the rocky terrain, I came across a massive boulder lodged between the canyon walls. Without a second thought, I began to descend, using the boulder as support. My feet touched the ground first, but as I released my grip, disaster struck. In an instant, the boulder shifted, slamming down with bone-crushing force. The pain was immediate, searing through my right arm. I looked down, horrified. My arm was wedged between the boulder and the canyon wall. I screamed in pain, but it was more out of sheer shock than anything else. My arm, it was trapped, and no amount of struggling seemed to make any difference. I pulled with all the strength I had, but the rock didn't budge an inch. The panic began to creep in. I was stuck in the middle of nowhere, without a soul around, with my arm pinned by a 1,000-pound boulder. The reality of the situation hit hard. I tried everything, pushing, pulling, wedging rocks, even using my climbing equipment to pry the boulder, but nothing worked. It was as if the rock was laughing at me, mocking my attempts. Hours passed, and the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. I realized how cold the desert night would get. I tried not to think about the agony in my arm, but the pain was relentless. The throbbing was constant, a painful reminder of my dire situation. It felt like my hand was on fire, but there was nothing I could do except sit and wait. The temperature dropped rapidly, and I began to shiver uncontrollably. I hadn't planned on being out overnight, so I wasn't prepared for the cold. My thin gear did little to protect me from the freezing night air. I kept trying to pull my arm out, but each attempt only made the pain worse. I remember looking up at the stars that night, realizing how utterly alone I was. The silence was deafening. All I could hear was my own breathing, ragged and shallow. The canyon felt alive, but indifferent to my suffering. It was as if the vast desert was swallowing me whole. I couldn't let myself lose hope, though. I was known for being resourceful, and I believed, somehow, I could find a way out. I had a water bottle, a couple of burritos, and a small multi-tool in my pack. I rationed my food and water, trying to stay calm and think of a plan, but no plan seemed to work. By the second day, the numbness in my hand spread, but the pain in my arm was unrelenting. The days blurred together, and my mind began playing tricks on me. I thought I heard voices, maybe hikers nearby, but no one came. The isolation gnawed at me. Little did I know that the next 4 days would be absolute hell. The hunger set in quickly, gnawing at my stomach, but the thirst was worse. My water was running out, and every sip felt precious. I knew dehydration would hit me soon, and without water, my chances of survival would plummet. I couldn't panic. I knew that panic would only burn more energy and worsen my condition. On the third day, delirium began to set in. I hallucinated that a rainstorm was coming, imagining I could drink from it, but it never came. The sun baked the canyon during the day, and the cold returned each night. My energy was fading fast, and I knew I was losing time. My fingers started to feel like dead weight, and I could tell that the circulation had stopped. My arm was dying. Days turned into a blur of agonizing thirst, unbearable heat, and a growing sense of despair. My water supply was gone, and I was running out of time. My arm was completely trapped under the boulder, crushed against the canyon wall. I had tried everything, pushing, pulling, using leverage with the ropes and tools I had in my pack, but nothing worked. The boulder wouldn't budge. It was as if the earth itself had decided to hold me captive. By the 5th day, dehydration had started to take its toll. My lips were cracked, my skin burned from the desert sun. I was lightheaded and weak, barely able to focus. I drank the last of my water 2 days ago, and now, with no other choice, I resorted to the unthinkable, drinking my own urine. It was vile, but it kept me alive, for now. As the days dragged on, I began to have strange, vivid hallucinations. I saw my family, my friends, my life before all of this. It was as if my mind was taunting me, showing me everything I was about to lose. I knew that I was nearing the end. My body was shutting down, and if I didn't do something soon, I was going to die in that canyon. It was then that the thought crept into my mind. The only way to save myself was to do the unthinkable. I had heard survival stories before, stories of people who had been forced to make unimaginable decisions to survive. But this was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Could I really cut off my own arm? Could I actually go through with it? I tried to push the thought away, but it kept coming back, stronger each time. There was no other way out. If I didn't act soon, I would die here, alone in this godforsaken place. I stared at my trapped arm, and for the first time, I realized what I had to do. It was the hardest decision I would ever make, but I knew it was the only chance I had. Little did I know, the next few hours would be the most excruciating and horrifying of my entire life. The decision was made. I would cut off my own arm to survive. Morning came, and with it, a terrifying clarity. My mind was made up. I took out the dull blade of my multi-tool, hands trembling as I realized what was about to happen. The fear was overwhelming, but I knew it was the only way. If I didn't act, I would die here, in this forsaken canyon. My mind replayed the horror over and over, severing my own arm to survive. It was unimaginable, but it was my last hope. I tied a makeshift tourniquet around my upper arm, using a piece of rope from my gear. I knew I had to cut off the circulation to prevent myself from bleeding out once I began. Then, without giving myself time to overthink, I started. The first cut was agonizing. The knife was dull, and I had to saw through the skin and muscle slowly. The pain was excruciating, but I knew I couldn't stop. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to quit, but there was no turning back now. I bit down on my lip, tears streaming down my face as I kept going. I thought I'd pass out, but the adrenaline kept me conscious. After what felt like an eternity, I hit the bone. The pain was indescribable, and I realized I would have to break it to get free. Using my body weight and all the strength I had left, I twisted my arm until I felt the snap. The sound was sickening, but the surge of relief that followed was overpowering. I kept going, cutting through the remaining flesh until finally, I was free. I couldn't believe it. I looked down at the bloody stump where my arm had been, barely registering the pain anymore. My body was in shock, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I had lost too much blood already, and if I didn't get help soon, I wouldn't make it. My arm was gone, but I was alive. That thought kept me going. I stumbled through the canyon, weak and delirious. Every step was torture, but I forced myself to keep moving. I had to find help, or this would all be for nothing. The sun was merciless, beating down on me as I made my way through the desert. My vision blurred, and I could feel myself slipping in and out of consciousness, but I couldn't stop. I had made it this far. I wasn't going to die now. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. Time had lost all meaning. But then, in the distance, I saw something. A family hiking through the canyon. It felt like a hallucination, too good to be true. I waved, screamed, did everything I could to get their attention. And then, miraculously, they saw me. The family rushed to my aid, their faces a mixture of horror and disbelief when they saw the state I was in. I collapsed as soon as they reached me, my body finally giving out after the ordeal. They called for help immediately, and soon a rescue helicopter arrived. I remember the sound of the blades whirring above me as they airlifted me out of the canyon. It was over. I had survived. Against all odds, I was alive. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the pain. My body was broken, my arm gone, but I had made it out. I spent weeks recovering in the hospital, coming to terms with what had happened. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. Most people wouldn't have made it through what I had endured, but I didn't feel lucky. I felt changed, forever scarred by the experience. It took months to fully recover, physically and mentally. Losing my arm was hard, but the psychological toll was even harder. I had nightmares, flashbacks to the canyon, to the moment I realized I had to cut off my own arm. The trauma stayed with me, and it took years to truly come to terms with what had happened. But in the end, I found peace. I learned to accept my new reality, to embrace the second chance I had been given. I had faced death and come out the other side. The experience taught me something about myself, that I was stronger than I ever imagined, that when pushed to the absolute limit, the human spirit can endure anything. Now, when I look back, I don't feel anger or regret. I feel gratitude. I survived, and that's all that matters.